get started with today's episode, I would like to quickly read you our podcast disclaimer. This podcast is for educational purposes only, and it is not to substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. You should always speak with your physician or other healthcare professionals before doing any fasting, changing your diet in any way, taking or adjusting any medications or supplements, or adopting any treatment plan for a health problem. The use of any other products or services purchased by you as a result of this podcast does not create a healthcare provider-patient relationship between you and any of the experts affiliated with this podcast. Any information and statements regarding dietary supplements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. All right, and now we'll get started with today's episode.
Hi everyone, I'm Nadia Patiguana, and we are back for another episode of the Fasting Method podcast. And today I am joined by our newest co-host, Dr. Terri Lance, who's here with me today. And we are back for part 2 of all things TRE. So if you haven't already, I highly recommend that you go back and listen to part 1, where Terri and I discussed my absolute favorite topic, what I call the Beyonce of the show, the epitome of intermittent fasting, the main event, the building block, whatever you want to call, all the cliche, but whatever you want to call it, TRE, which stands for time restricted eating. So last time we went over quite a few things. I just realized I haven't even said hello to you. Hi, Terri. How are you?
Hey, Nadia. I'm good. Good to see you. How are you doing?
Good. I'm so excited about this topic, of course. And I feel like even if you've heard every single thing that we have said in part 1, and even if you feel like you may have heard everything that we might have to say today about TRE, that's good. I'm happy about that because I'm a big fan of repetition. And I think this topic is so important that it requires lots and lots of repetition. But maybe some things are new. I still think that even for the most advanced fasters, oftentimes when I start to work with them, I realize that they're still not giving TRE the critical importance that it deserves. So super happy to be back here for part 2. I was joking with Terri that I think we're going to do part 100 and very likely a masterclass on TRE because that is how important it really, really is. So Terri, last time you wrote down some notes on things that you'd like to cover today because we didn't have a chance to cover everything last time. So I'm going to hand it over to you and let's start talking.
Great, Nadia. First, I want to just refresh everyone's memory, or if you haven't gone back and listened to the other episode first, what do we mean by time restricted eating? And it really means to only eat meals. If it's not mealtime, you're not eating. So any food you're going to have today, it comes to you during a mealtime. And then no snacking, no grazing. And then if you're having a second meal, that comes 5 or 6 hours later, whatever your plan is. And that this also becomes fasting. I eat 1 meal today and I eat 2 meals tomorrow, and I don't eat in between. So time restricted eating is the concept. One of the things I wrote down, Nadia, is that you and I both experienced this, that many people say, well, I only did TRE, or I only did 18-6, as if that doesn't count, or it's not important. And I thought it would be helpful for you and I to talk a little bit about our experience with that and working with so many people in the community, and maybe to help people reframe how they talk about that to themselves.
I think that's a great idea. In fact, people that have heard part 1, there's some really great feedback from people that in our community that we've talked to about listening in to part 1 of this topic. In my opinion, and I really just want to hear your thoughts before I start going off on a tangent. But today, for example, I had a consultation with somebody that worked with me many years ago and was highly successful. And now I haven't seen her in a couple of years, with the pandemic and all that. And so she booked a call with me today. And as soon as I started talking with her, more often than not, I find that even people, as I said, that are advanced fasters or that have done really well in the past, more often than not, the one thing that they may have forgotten about, or again, not really given the importance that it truly deserves, is TRE. Right away she started talking about, but I'm still doing 5-day fasts and then I gain all the weight back. And, it's this concept that as soon as people want to lose weight or they want to, whatever it is, or get back on track, they think right away of doing extended fasting. They don't often, just innately give TRE the critical importance that it deserves. And I always start by reminding people, you know what, we got to go back to basics. We got to go, don't skip steps. You really need to have that really strong foundation, even if it is your second time around going through this.
I think this is super important, Nadia. And I remember something you said from the first time we talked about this. It's like starting out in grade 7, but you haven't completed grades 1 through 3. You can't jump ahead and expect that you're really going to do well. You might be able to white knuckle it and get through those fasts, but they're not really going to give you the results, and you're skipping out on the basic skills. I always, and I'm guessing you may do something similar, I actually emphasize starting with TRE, getting that really solid, and then turning up that dial of intensity of our fasts. But without TRE, fasting is not going to be something that really is sustainably successful. You may get spurts of success, but if you want it to really sustain your success, you have to have the foundation. You have to have grades 1, 2, and 3 if you want what you learned in grade 7 to take hold. And I also use an analogy, not because I think everyone listening loves running or identifies as a runner, but I think it's something we can all imagine. If I want to run a marathon, and I think that is the epitome of running success, I don't say, you know what, I'm going to start running. Tomorrow I'm going to run 18 miles. We start with 1 mile. We build on that. We get good at that 1 mile. We strengthen our running muscles, and then we can do 2, but we go back to 1, and then we can do 4, and we go back to 1. Even people who run really long distances still do 1 and 2 mile runs. So they have that basic skill and they build on it. You don't decide today I'm going to start fasting and do a 10-day fast. You build the skill. And this is why TRE is such a kind of fundamental foundation of fasting that you and I emphasize so much.
But you know what, Terri? This is the thing about fasting that I have found over the last almost 10 years working with people with fasting, is that a lot of people do that when it comes to fasting, because for some people, extended fasting comes so quote unquote easily. It's an easy thing to do. And so I love how you said you don't just start fasting and do a 10-day fast, but guess what? Some people do. My husband's very first fast was a 12-day fast. I'll tell you what the issue is with that. He so easily skipped steps and jumped ahead to do that 12-day fast that he never took the required time to learn how to do TRE properly. So even though he lost a ton of weight and very, very quickly, because he did do many extended fasts back to back at the beginning, but he had a lot of regain that he couldn't understand and he couldn't manage. And years later, almost 10 years later, he's still going through that phase, that healing phase, that weight loss phase that he should have had done 10 years ago, right? Every time, the easy thing to do, as you said, is to white knuckle through another extended fast. And still, he is one of these people. And many of you guys listening are, especially if you find extended fasting to just come to you. Most people can't run a marathon. Terri, most people need to practice. They need to go for quite a few runs before they can run a marathon. For some reason, some people can just jump into an extended fast without doing the adequate practice. And that's what makes fasting different than all these other things. So the analogies are great, but because they can skip steps and because some people can just, like, I couldn't do it. I could never do a 10-day fast unless I prepared adequately for it. I have done some 5 days and some 7 days, but for me, it comes with a lot of preparation. But some people, for some reason, can just do these fasts. Don't you find that?
I do. And I think there are a number of factors there. One is that for many people, it's like finding the holy grail. It's like finding the secret sauce that works. And so it's so shiny and fun and attractive to do because eating is the thing that has been complicated for them. So if I do a 10-day fast, I don't have to make any decisions about eating. It's off my plate, literally. And so I don't have to have that angst or that decision fatigue. So it's very attractive. It's also, and you and I have talked a little bit about this before, but the idea that it's almost like for some people, it's like a light switch. I'm fasting, therefore all food is off. That 100% commitment is easier than 92% commitment. It's easier than saying, I'm going to eat some meals this week. Now we have to start making difficult decisions. So again, people are very drawn to those longer fasts. And the other thing, just physiologically, that you and I both know is all of the benefits of fasting kick in and you don't have hunger anymore. You do have increased brain clarity and energy. Who wouldn't want those things? Mm-hmm. The challenge is the results don't stick in the same way. If you don't have TRE to come back to, you do a lot of kind of extremes. Long fast, going off track. Long fast, going off track. Versus get the full benefit from those things you're doing. Give your body that support in between with proper eating. I actually have a client, Nadia, who worked with you years ago and was very successful, achieved her weight loss goals, felt great, had a baby, went through COVID, everything. And when she came back to us and started fasting again, she realized she never paid attention to TRE. She would eat whatever she wanted, even though she was eating pretty good foods, but it was kind of fair game whenever she wanted to eat. And she wasn't making the progress that she had made before. And she was unable to do the longer fast that she had once done. So she was really stuck with, what do I do now? And for a couple of months, I had her focusing solely on TRE. She actually lost a little bit of weight during that time, but she conquered so many kind of eating, demons, so to speak, about food issues that were coming up for her and changing her habits. So now, whether she does a long fast or a short fast, she comes right back to her TRE.
I think this is definitely worth repeating, particularly for the people listening in going, do I really need to learn about TRE? I can do all these long fasts and I have success and I'm losing weight and I've lost so much weight. I think this point is worth repeating. I think those people, because my husband ignored me for all these years because he was having success and he knew that that was something that he can always go back to. Extended fasting was always there for him. It was always something he could do because he travels a lot for work. So the excuse was always, of course I'm going to regain a lot of weight because I'm away traveling and whatnot. And so extended fasting is a tool that's always there for some people. And so it's definitely worth repeating for those people what you said just now, which is that in order for you to achieve the full benefit, even if you are able to do extended fasting and even if you are losing weight, TRE is necessary for you to get the full benefit, not just now during this part of your journey, but for you to eventually maintain all those gains and all of that success. So, I cannot repeat that enough, why I am so adamant about this, whether you can do extended fasting or not.
It's interesting that you talk about that. I was thinking about, what things we would cover today, and I was thinking about TRE even at the point of saying 18-6, like 2 meals a day, and then maybe some 24s or whatever you go on to beyond that. And oftentimes people talk about that as if it's not enough. And I have found that for some people, it is absolutely what works for their body. And other people, they say, oh, that's not enough fasting for my body. Okay. But still get the skill of TRE so that you can do more fasting with that. For other people, as you said, it's what's going to help them sustain the accomplishments they've made. I've worked on not using the word maintenance because it's like people feel like there's a magical point you reach versus if you want your health and your weight to be sustainable, TRE is the most important thing you can learn. I wanted to share with you something that a community member shared. And those of you out there listening, if you're not already a member of the Fasting Method community, it's an online community, and we have community meetings throughout the week. Each of the coaches hosts these meetings. And I was hosting one yesterday, and a community member that I hadn't seen in a while came in, and she said, I just want to share something about kind of my success. Everyone got really excited and we were listening to her. And she also had success in the past with longer fasts, but was struggling to do more fasting right now. So she focused primarily on TRE. She said, I stopped snacking, grazing, TRE, 18 sixes, and some 24s. And listen to what happened for her. First of all, she had her fasting insulin tested. When she had started really keeping track of this, she had that tested, and her fasting insulin was in the 70s, which you and I know is very high. After 3 months of doing her TRE, 18-6 with some 24s, her fasting insulin came down, I'm not sure if she said the high 40s or low 50s. So already a significant lowering, and she's getting ready to have it tested again. So she's very excited about what's next. Her blood sugar, when she first started, was coming up at about 170, and now about 100. So quite a reduction in her blood glucose. She also takes insulin for her glucose control. And when she started, the number of units she was taking, I think she said somewhere around 77 units, 78 units a day. And now she's down into the 20s. So she's been able to decrease her medication that much. And at first, she didn't lose much weight. The whole reason she brought this up is because she talked about the fact that she stopped focusing on the weight loss and started focusing on I'm going to lower my insulin. She gave an example at some point that in 14 days, she lost like 13 pounds. That suddenly the weight started moving for her again. She got into ketosis, which she hadn't been able to do because she was taking so much insulin and her insulin was so high. So all of these health benefits, because she was doing TRE and some 24-hour fasts. That's how powerful it is.
I love testimonials, by the way. I have some examples that I use all the time within our community because we got new people coming in every single day to our community meetings. And, you want them to start, I do too. I want them to start right off the bat realizing how important TRE is and how, the better that they do with TRE, the better, you just said something a little while ago, which really, I love how you're using, instead of maintenance, how, you have a much better definition. But in order to sustain all your gains long term, you really have to master TRE. And I credit TRE for my success, not only in having such great results in my healing part of my journey, but also in the maintenance. There I am using that word again, but the long part of the journey, which really is to sustain this lifestyle. And so, yeah, a lot of people lose a ton of weight with extended fasting, but those are the same people that are going to go through that frustrating yo-yo effect that they've been going through their entire lives with all these other diets, right, that they've done. And you don't want to go through that again. I mean, there's nothing more disappointing than finding fasting, and to feel as good as people feel fasting and then to feel disappointed because the regain just makes them at times question, how is this different than every other plan that I've done? Well, TRE is the difference, right? TRE is definitely the difference. But I have these great testimonials I use all the time, examples of, this amazing woman that I worked with. She's actually one of the testimonials on our social media and our page. She was a grandma, postmenopausal, woman who lost over 50 pounds. And again, quote unquote, TRE with some 24-hour fasts. And the reason why she was so successful, because people often question that, why do some people do so well, even with quote unquote just TRE? It's because they actually do TRE. Anytime I hear people tell me, well, 42-hour alternate day fasts don't work for me, right away, first clue. For me, the first thing that I start to investigate is, all right, let me look at your TRE. And 9 times out of 10, their TRE is off. And that's what's causing the issue. That's what's, setting them back.
Absolutely. I was just talking with a client the other day, and she realized that the way she used to do fasting, working with us, was when someone would say, oh, I do 2 MAD or 2 meals a day. She nodded and said, yeah, so do I. But what she was not paying attention to were all the little things that she did in between those 2 meals. And this, again, was why she wasn't experiencing the success with that fasting plan. So the idea that even when you get really good at fasting, if your TRE is not strong, it's not going to take hold as successfully or be sustainable. It may be immediate results, but if you want long-term results, I have become a Nadia follower on this. TRE is the way to do it. And for people, as we've been talking about it, it's that idea of turning up and down that fasting dial. It's 16, it's 24, it's 42, it's, whatever that number is, TRE is always there. And if not, the fasting results are compromised. And I think for many of us, the food freedom goal is compromised. If I want to be free of cravings and constantly thinking about food, I have to get my food into my meals and only. I know this even from my own experience, and I've had success with this. But once I stop paying attention to my meals and TRE, I don't even notice unless I then cause myself to look back. Oh yeah, and then I did this. And oh yeah, then I put some more stuff in that coffee. And oh yeah, then I did this. It's so easy to backslide if you're not really reiterating the importance of time-restricted eating.
The feedback that I got from part 1 of this, when you and I first talked about TRE, I believe it was episode 52, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong. The most important feedback that I got from people was when you, Terri, mentioned not liking the expression eating windows. And I think that it's important to go back to that again, because we very easily give fasting schedules names, right? So it's the 16-8, it's the 42-hour alternate day, the 42 times 3, or the 24 times 4. And so the focus then is automatic on that big number. It's on the fasting. So then the little number for the 16-8, for example, people call it your eating window, your 8-hour eating window, your 6-hour eating window. And so then, of course, that allows for a whole bunch of grazing and snacking, if you look at it that way. So if right off the bat, we get rid of that term of eating windows and we focus on calling it TRE and full meals, no snacks, I think people are going to be successful right from day one. And they're not going to have to relearn this and go through sort of these hiccups and these, more painful sort of episodes that other people, unfortunately, in the past have gone through. So I'm very thankful to be having this conversation again. I'm very thankful for the repetition. I think repetition is key. And a lot of people are still, they're still in that mindset that they're ignoring all of this because they're doing so great with extended fasting. So that's definitely something that I want to make sure that we are repeating and that people are having the opportunity to really absorb this information.
You just reminded me of something I've heard Megan talk about a number of times in our community. And she would refer to those times between those meals, that 6-hour block or that 8-hour block, as a mini fast. So it's basically it's an 18-hour fast, and then it's another 4 or 5-hour fast in between. It's a 48-hour fast, and then a 16-hour fast between that meal that you break the fast with and your next meal. So it's not that you're only fasting for the big number in those protocols, but there's a mini fast between meals also. And I think that concept is really helpful. Rather than the eating windows, to think of those as I fast again between this meal and my next meal.
I don't know if we're going to have a chance to tackle this subtopic here today. We might have to go to part 3, but there's another really important rule of mastering TRE, or benefit of mastering TRE, which is it gives you the opportunity, and you've mentioned a lot of this today, but it's such a big topic that I think it will require a much more in-depth conversation. But TRE gives you the opportunity to deal with your relationship with food. Okay, so this is definitely a Terri topic. It's definitely something that I know you work with your clients and our community members on all the time. Okay, you must, because extended fasting, again, I know you use this expression all the time, and I repeat it with my, in my meetings and in my consultations, is that people that find extended fasting really easy, they're doing a lot of food avoidance. And you can easily recognize it. When people are super eager to fast and they find extended fasting so easy, you know that they have a big issue likely with food, with their relationship with food, with choosing the right foods. And they just feel this relief when they don't have to choose foods. So TRE gives you, although it's challenging, but it's an amazing opportunity to work on your relationship with food. And it's something that you can only avoid for so long. You must, and the sooner that you face this and deal with it, the better. So great opportunity, big topic, likely going to have to leave that for part 3. Another thing is TRE gives you another amazing opportunity before you get into all-day fasts, extended fasts, healing therapeutic fasts, to start addressing your hydration. How much salt do you need? How much magnesium do you need? How much water do you need? Amazing opportunity and necessary, because before you go on to doing, even though you may not realize, you might be one of those people, again, I know I talk about my husband a lot. Terri is used to this because we've been to so many conferences together, and in one presentation, in one lecture, I'll say my husband about 80 times, but he's such an easy target for me. He's one of those people who doesn't feel dehydration during a fast. So he could do an extended fast with very little, if any, salt, with very little, if any, magnesium. And I worry about him because I know he still needs it. He's still a human, not an alien. He still needs salt, he still needs magnesium. So even though he doesn't feel the dehydration the way that I do, it's still happening. And so I worry. So for those of you listening, this is an amazing opportunity as you work with your TRE and possibly bringing in some 24-hour fasts. Amazing opportunity to start thinking about, okay, how much salt do I need if I'm doing 2 meals? How much salt do I need if I'm only doing 1 meal? So electrolytes and hydration. Another point, amazing opportunity for you to work on fasting aids, for you to figure out what fasting aids are, what are the different options, and how much do you need? For example, as you transition from doing 3 meals a day to 2 meals a day, eventually to doing some alternate day fasting with maybe 1 meal or no meal, are you going to need 1 fasting aid, 2 fasting aids, and which ones are better for you? So it's an amazing opportunity. Whereas if you just jump right in, sort of head first, blindly into extended fasting, you're not going to get a chance to deal with any of this stuff. And so then when you finish that fast, you also don't have, this is a big thing for me, because the success of an extended fast is really heavily based upon how you break that fast. It really is. And the next few days after an extended fast are heavily determined by how you break that fast. So again, TRE gives you the opportunity time and time again to work on your hydration, to work on your relationship with food, and to work on your fasting aids.
Absolutely. I hadn't really thought of it that way. And it's really a nice way to think about it. It's a focal point or a building block that also allows you time to work on the other building blocks. Get all of those skills in place so that your fasting, whatever it ends up looking like when you go to longer fasts, can be sustainable and successful, that you really get to feel the benefits of it. I think the other point, and I know I said this earlier, but I want to re-emphasize this. Many of us want things to be very simplified. And that's, again, like I said, that's why some people like longer fasts, no decisions to make. So if you want to simplify your relationship with eating, how often to eat, is there emotional eating? Do you eat when you're bored? Do you eat just because it's mealtime on a fasting day even? If you really start to use your TRE as that guide, is this a scheduled mealtime? If it is, great. Pull together all of your food, as we talked about last time, Nadia, plating that meal, eating it, enjoying it, and then being done and waiting until your next meal. And if you check in with yourself, I often use examples of, I have to do a lot of internal dialogue about these things. And I'll say, this food really sounds good right now. And I have to stop and ask myself, Terri, is it mealtime? No. Okay, then we're going to wait. I talk with myself like I would if I were a parent and the kid keeps asking for something that it's not time for yet. Oh, it's not time for that yet. We're going to wait. We're going to have that at dinner time. I need those check-ins with myself because my slippery slope brain is just like everyone else's, and it will try to talk me into changing my plan for now. Oh, it's okay if you eat just this. It's all right if you have just one of these. Yeah, but you're a little bit hungry now. Go ahead and start now. And if I come right back to that kind of black and white answer, is it mealtime for me right now? A planned mealtime? No, then I continue to wait. Yes, then I bring together the meal and I enjoy it. So giving yourself that simplified way of thinking about it. Get rid of all of that angst and decision making. Mealtime? Eat. Not mealtime? Don't eat. Make it real simple for yourself in that way.
I wanted to go back real quick to some more feedback that I got from part 1 of this topic. Somebody today was saying, and you mentioned this today, so I thought it was worth mentioning it again from somebody else's point of view. But somebody else was saying today that because they started their journey, and they're so glad that they started their journey with a real strong TRE protocol, and they lost tons of weight. And they actually didn't have to, quote unquote, start doing alternate day fasting or extended fast until weeks, if not months into their journey, because I think they lost somewhere like, again, 50 pounds or so with doing real good proper TRE. So that's a very, I think it's important for some people to hear that. The other thing is that I think that if you start with a real strong TRE protocol, and then, of course, you move on to doing some healing, therapeutic fast or alternate day fast for whatever your goal is, you're much more likely to fall back onto a comfortable, strong holding pattern. This is what I call it when life gets in the way, because inevitably life will get in the way. I mean, we want everyone's healing journey to be as swift and quick as possible and simple and linear, even though nobody's journey really is linear, because life inevitably gets in the way, whether it's a short trip away or something stressful going on in your life. And so if you have mastered TRE, if you understand TRE, if you've had some experience, if you started whether you started your journey with it or not, but if at some point you mastered it, you're much more likely to then, again, sustain all your gains, even during some challenging times in your life.
And I think that's really important to emphasize right now, because for many people, we are in the midst of a holiday season. And relationship with food and social eating, all of those things bring up some challenges. I get excited every year when this happens, but it comes to January or February when people kind of come back after the holidays. And oftentimes, clients will say to me, Terri, I'm so surprised. Either I didn't gain weight this year, or I actually lost some weight over the holidays. And I always have them talk about how that happened. Like, well, what did you do? How did that happen? They say, I don't know, because I was eating these treats and desserts and things. What else did you do? Oh, well, I only ate my meals, and I did a lot of 2-meal days and some 1-meal days. Did you do longer fast during the holiday? No, I did 2 meals and some 1 meals. And they didn't gain weight, and some even have lost some weight. Going back to that safe holding pattern of TRE, even through the holidays, prevented it from becoming a disaster for them.
Well, that sounds right about the right spot to end this conversation for today, but it definitely leaves us with a need for part 3. I think we really need to talk a little bit more about that. We need to talk a little bit more about this idea of having an opportunity to build your relationship with food during TRE, to talk about hydration, to talk about fasting aids. And really one thing that I don't know that we talked enough about is, okay, so what does the in-between mini fasts look like? What can you consume? I actually don't know that we've practically talked a whole lot about that. So part 3 coming up next. Thanks so much, Terri. I'm so happy that I got the opportunity once again to talk to you, particularly, especially you, about this topic, and then everybody got to listen in. And we'll be back next week with, I think, Megan. I'm not sure what the next episode is, but for sure, the Fasting Method podcast will be back next week. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us again. Happy fasting, everyone.
Take good care. Bye, Nadia.
Bye.